I'm Kathryn, 28. The courtroom was abuzz with whispers, a tempest of anticipation brewing in the air. I stood tall, clutching a well-worn envelope, the edges frayed from countless anxious touches. The judge, a stern-faced woman with a gavel in her hand, looked down at me with a piercing gaze. "Miss Kathryn, present your evidence," she commanded, her voice echoing through the silent room. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I opened the envelope. Inside were the papers that held the key to my destiny. "Your Honor, these documents prove that I am the rightful heir to my grandfather's estate," I stated, my voice wavering but determined. My father, Victor, sat across the room, his face a mask of cold fury. His eyes burned with hatred as he watched me, his hands clenched into fists. Beside him was my brother, Derek, fidgeting nervously, his eyes darting around the room. It all started on the day we buried my grandfather, Henry. The church was filled with the heavy scent of incense, a sickly sweet smell that clung to my clothes. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, a tall, gaunt man with a somber expression, cleared his throat. "I regret to inform you that Mr. Henry had no will," he said, his voice cold and clinical. My father's lips curled into a cruel smile, a smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "You won't get a single cent, Kathryn. Derek will be the next heir," he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. I felt a lump rise in my throat, humiliation washing over me like a tidal wave. I wanted to scream, to tell him that I had worked just as hard as Derek, that I had spent countless nights at my grandfather's side, learning the family business. But the words died on my lips as I looked into his cold, hard eyes. In the days that followed, my world crumbled around me. At the family's construction company, Henry's Sons, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The employees, once friendly and welcoming, now avoided my gaze. Some looked at me with pity, while others with fear, as if I were a plague. My father wasted no time taking over as CEO. He strutted through the halls like a king, his expensive suit rustling with every step. Derek followed him like a shadow, his eyes filled with greed and ambition. One day, I was summoned to the boardroom. The room was dimly lit, the walls lined with dark wood paneling. My father sat at the head of the table, flanked by his cronies. "Kathryn, you have no place here anymore. From now on, Derek will be groomed as the successor," he announced, his voice booming with false authority. Derek smirked, his eyes glinting with arrogance. "Don't take it personally, sis. Some of us are just born for this," he said, his words like a knife in my heart. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, but I quickly wiped it away. I refused to let them see me cry. That night, I wandered the streets of Boston, the cold rain soaking through my clothes. I thought about my grandfather, about the promises he had made to me. He had always told me that I was special, that I had the integrity to carry on his legacy. 3 nights later, I was sitting in my apartment, lost in thought, when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find my mother, Amelia, standing there, her face pale and drawn. She was holding a purse tightly in her hands, as if it were a shield. "Kathryn, we need to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She slipped inside the apartment and closed the door behind her. I looked at her, my heart pounding in my chest. "What's going on, Mom?" I asked, my voice filled with fear. She took a deep breath and pulled out a sealed envelope from her purse. "This is from your grandfather. He gave it to me before he died," she said, her hands trembling. I took the envelope, my fingers brushing against the wax seal. "What's in here?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Proof that you are the rightful heir," she replied, her eyes filled with tears. "Your father has lied to you for years. He never wanted you to inherit the company because he was afraid of your strength, of your integrity." I stared at her, stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All these years, I had thought that I was just an unwanted daughter, a burden to my family. But now I realized that I was the one with the true claim to the legacy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope. The wax seal glowed in the dim light, like a beacon of hope. Finally, at dawn, I couldn't resist any longer. I broke the seal and unfolded the documents inside. The first was a letter from my grandfather. "Kathryn, if you are reading this, it means that I am gone. I always knew that Victor would try to take what was rightfully yours. But I made sure that you would have the proof you needed to fight him. You are my true heir, the one with the heart and the soul to carry on my legacy," it read. My hands shook as I read the words, tears streaming down my face. My grandfather had believed in me, even when no one else did. Behind the letter was a certified birth record. It listed my full name, Kathryn, but under the father's name, there was a blank space. Instead, there was a notarized amendment signed by my grandfather, legally recognizing me as his heir and granddaughter by bloodline acknowledgement. I gasped, my mind racing. All these years, my father had let me believe that I was his daughter, his unwanted child. But the truth was far more complicated. The final page in the envelope was a notarized copy of my grandfather's last statement. "To Kathryn, I leave the company because she has the integrity to protect what I built. If Victor challenges this, know that my word has always been stronger than his greed," it stated. I felt a surge of anger and determination wash over me. I knew that I had to fight for what was rightfully mine. The following Sunday, my father called for a family gathering at the estate. I knew it was a trap, but I couldn't back down. I slipped the envelope into my bag and headed to the mansion. The house was filled with relatives and company board members, all sipping champagne and chatting animatedly. My father stood at the center of the room, his face a picture of false charm. "We are here to celebrate Derek's official appointment as vice president of Henry Sons," he announced, raising his glass. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Before you start celebrating, there's something everyone needs to know," I said, my voice loud and clear. My father's eyes narrowed. "Kathryn, this isn't the time or the place," he growled. I ignored him and reached into my bag, pulling out the envelope. "This is proof that Grandpa never intended for the company to fall into Derek's hands. He saw me as his heir," I said, my voice rising. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. My father's face turned red with anger. "Sit down, Kathryn. You're embarrassing yourself," he barked. I opened the letter and began to read it aloud. As I finished, the room erupted in whispers. Some relatives looked at me with shock, while others with awe. My father lunged at me, his face contorted with rage. "You think a few pieces of paper will change anything? This company is mine by law," he shouted. But my mother stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "She's telling the truth, Victor. Henry left those papers with me because he didn't trust you," she said. The room fell into stunned silence. My father's eyes burned with hatred as he stared at me. "This isn't over, Kathryn," he hissed. Back in the present, in the courtroom, the judge listened intently as I presented my evidence. The witnesses, including an old secretary, Mrs. Jenkins, who had seen the original will in Mr. Thompson's safe, testified one by one. My father's face grew paler with each piece of evidence presented. When the financial records were shown, indicating large withdrawals around the time the will disappeared, his mask of confidence began to crack. "These transactions have no business justification. We believe they were payments to conceal the will and intimidate witnesses," Mr. Thompson, my lawyer, stated firmly. My father stammered, his eyes darting around the room. "Those funds were for private business expenses," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. My mother then stood up from the gallery. "Your Honor, I can confirm what Kathryn has said. Henry gave me the envelope because he feared Victor would destroy the will," she said, her voice strong and clear. The judge banged her gavel. "Based on the evidence presented, this court finds sufficient cause to open a criminal investigation into Victor and Mr. Thompson for fraud and will concealment. The estate of Henry shall be temporarily frozen until the investigation concludes," she announced. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had done it. I had finally broken through my father's lies and deception. Weeks later, the dust began to settle. Victor and Mr. Thompson faced a full-scale criminal investigation, their power crumbling under the weight of their lies. The court recognized me as the rightful heir to my grandfather's estate. I walked through the company's headquarters, the sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor. The walls were lined with photographs of past projects, memories of the nights I had spent with my grandfather. Derek came to my office one day. He looked smaller, his arrogance replaced by humility. "Kathryn, I was wrong. Dad made me believe I deserved everything, but I see now he used me. Please, let me help rebuild the company," he said, his voice soft. I looked at him, torn between old wounds and the hope for a new beginning. "You'll start at the bottom. No shortcuts. If you want redemption, you'll earn it," I said. He nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "Thank you," he replied. That night, I stood in the company's lobby, looking at my grandfather's portrait. His eyes seemed to smile at me, filled with pride. "I'll protect what you left me, Grandpa." "With honor," I whispered. As I stepped outside, the crisp Boston air filled my lungs. The city lights twinkled like stars, a reminder of the future that awaited me. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to face it, armed with the truth and the legacy of my grandfather.